The first sign wasn't sound. It wasn't light. It was the stars. On a calm summer night, stargazers in Arizona noticed something wrong. A patch of the Milky Way was gone. Not hidden by clouds, not dimmed, simply erased. An emptiness had opened, in the sky, vast and deliberate, as though someone had smeared black ink across the heavens. Then the black moved. Across every observatory and telescope on Earth, astronomers gasped as a silhouette the size of a continent slid out of the void. No human vessel could compare. No satellite had prepared them. It was not a ship in the human sense, it was alive. Its surface rippled like muscle under skin, veins glowing faintly with pulses of molten blue. Plates of organic armor flexed as though breathing. The creature ship blotted out constellations as it turned, its bulk dwarfing every orbital station humanity had ever launched. And then the world felt it. Every phone, every screen, every broadcast station flickered to static. Emergency alerts failed. For a heartbeat, humanity was deaf and blind. Then, the static became a voice. A sound like 1,000 throats screaming through metal tore across the airwaves. The words were jagged but clear enough to translate across every tongue. Surrender. That single word echoed in boardrooms, living rooms, and war rooms across the planet. No explanation. No diplomacy. Just a command. In Washington, generals froze. In Moscow, hands hovered over launch keys. In Beijing, command centers went silent. Over the Atlantic, the creature stirred again. Its flesh split open with wet tearing sounds, releasing dozens, no, hundreds, of pods. They glistened as they fell, each one trailing fire through the atmosphere like living meteors. The first impact struck the Sahara, the second Berlin, the third, Chicago. The ground buckled as if struck by hammers from the gods. In Chicago, Daniel, Harker shoved his daughter into their basement as sirens screamed across the city. The air outside rattled with shockwaves. He caught a glimpse of the sky through a crack in the roof and wished he hadn't. One of the pods was splitting open. Not like a machine hatch, like a wound tearing itself apart. From inside, shapes writhed, pushing outward. The first alien soldier stepped free. It was taller than any man, 8, maybe 9 feet of rippling sinew. Its flesh was armored in jagged plates like natural bone forged into armor. Its face, or what passed for one, was a twisted mask of ridges and teeth, eyes glowing faintly blue like embers inside a skull. Clawed hands dug into asphalt as it hauled itself upright. Then it roared. Windows shattered for blocks. Car alarms blared. More followed. Dozens. Their bodies were alive, flexing, adapting to Earth's air. They smelled the fear, heard the screams. Their claws flexed against their own flesh as though sharpening themselves for slaughter. The first volley of human gunfire rang out. National Guard troops opened fire from behind overturned trucks. The chatter of rifles echoed off skyscrapers. Bullets tore into alien flesh. Blood spattered, muscle tore. Yet within seconds the wounds closed, knitting themselves with sickening squelches. The aliens charged. A tank shell streaked down the Wi Boulevard, slamming into the nearest beast. The explosion tore it apart. Limbs scattered. Bone shards rattled across pavement. For a breath, humanity cheered. But then the pieces writhed, twitching, struggling to reform. The alien wasn't dead. Commander gave the order, roll forward. The tank obeyed, treads screaming as it surged ahead. With a crunch like thunder, it crushed the twitching remains beneath 20 tons of steel. This time, the creature did not rise. The other aliens paused. Just for a second, they looked at the flattened corpse, then at the tank, then at the soldiers who hadn't broken and run. And in that hesitation, humanity saw something. Not invincibility, not gods, not monsters beyond reach. They saw something that could bleed, something that could be broken. High above, the living dreadnought pulsed, watching. Its command echoed again across the world, deeper, angrier, surrender. But, for the first time, there was silence in reply. Silence not of fear but of refusal. Because beneath that shadow, in blood and smoke, humanity had found the one truth the invaders had not counted on. They had met flesh with steel. And steel did not yield. The streets burned. Smoke curled into the night sky as Chicago trembled under the weight of an invasion humanity had never imagined. The air smelled of ozone, charred concrete, and something fouler, the stench of wet meat cooking in fire. On Wabash Avenue, Sergeant Elaine Brooks reloaded her rifle with shaking hands. Her squad had fired 3 magazines into the same alien and it was still standing. Its chest was riddled with bullet holes, yet the wounds rippled and closed like liquid tar. It grinned, a jagged mouth of bone, and took another step forward. God, someone whispered. It won't die. The alien crouched low, claws clicking against the asphalt, then surged forward with terrifying speed. Elaine braced for the end, but before the creature could strike, a deafening boom shattered the air. A shell screamed overhead and slammed into the monster. The explosion ripped it apart, scattering chunks of bone and tissue across the street. Tank had arrived. The Abrams rumbled into view, its steel treads chewing through rubble. Another shell chambered. The gunner fired, and a second alien vanished in a cloud of gore. The squad cheered, hope surging like fire in their veins. But it didn't last. The third alien didn't fall. The shell had torn its arm off at the shoulder, yet even as it shrieked, tendrils of flesh lashed out, dragging the severed limb back to its socket. In seconds, the wound closed, bone clicking back into place. It slammed its newly restored fist against the tank's armor, denting the steel. The Abrams rocked. The alien roared, lifting one claw to strike again. The tank reversed, its massive treads grinding over the rubble. With a scream of hydraulics, it lurched forward and crushed the alien beneath 20 tons of rolling steel. Blood and bone sprayed in all directions. The beast spasmed, then fell still, its skull collapsing under the relentless weight. Silence. The other aliens, those towering, snarling monstrosities, stopped mid-charge. They turned, eyes glowing blue, watching as their kin was reduced to pulp beneath human machinery. For the first time since their arrival, they hesitated. Miles away, satellite feeds caught the scene in grainy black and white. Commanders in bunkers across the globe leaned closer, disbelief etched into their faces. "Play back that," one general whispered. The footage rolled again. Tank treads crushing alien flesh. The beast not rising. Its body left broken, beyond regeneration. Steel had done what bullets could not. Orders went out in seconds. All across the globe, armored brigades moved forward. In Berlin, leopards rolled through fire-choked streets. In Moscow, T-14s thundered down frozen highways. In Tokyo, Type 10s prowled the ruins. Humanity's armored heart awoke in unison. Everywhere. The story was the same. When flesh met iron, flesh screamed. But the battle was far from over. As the Abrams ground forward, another alien leapt from a rooftop. It landed on the tank like a predator on prey, claws screeching against armor. Soldiers opened fire, sparks flying as bullets ricocheted harmlessly off its hardened hide. The beast tore at the turret, snarling, muscles swelling as it tried to rip steel apart with raw strength. Inside, the gunner screamed. "It's on us! It's—" The commander yanked a lever. Smoke grenades burst outward, choking the street with thick gray fog. The tank's engine roared, gears grinding as it spun hard. The alien lost its grip and slammed against the pavement. "Now!" Elaine shouted. Her squad opened fire, not at its chest, not at its limbs, but at its eyes. The beast roared in agony, blinded, thrashing wildly. Then the Abrams finished the job, rolling forward and crushing its skull into pulp. The street shook with cheers. For the first time since the invasion began, soldiers believed. High above, the living dreadnought pulsed, with agitation. It watched its soldiers falter. It felt hesitation ripple through its ranks, and it hated it. Another command thundered across the skies. Louder this time. Angrier. Surrender. But down below, in the ruins of Chicago, Elaine Brooks spat blood into the dirt and raised her rifle, her voice was hoarse but steady. "Not today." The squad echoed her words. The tank's engine roared. Soldiers across the world repeated the defiance. The single word demand no longer sounded like a decree from gods. It sounded like desperation, from invaders who had been challenged, and humanity had just shown them what iron could do. The city was a graveyard. Smoke clung to the ruins of Chicago, choking the streets with a haze so thick it turned the sun into a blood-red smear in the sky. Buildings leaned like broken teeth, their windows blown out, their steel skeletons twisted by fire. The air carried only two sounds, the distant boom of tanks and the wet, guttural roars of the creatures that stalked the rubble. In the basement of a collapsed subway station, a dozen resistance fighters crouched in silence. Their leader, Corporal Mason Rivera, gripped a stolen alien blade. It was jagged, organic, still slick with blood, more like a fragment of bone than a weapon. But it was sharp enough. Above them, claws scraped against concrete. The aliens were hunting. Mason whispered, "Hold your fire. Wait." The fighters exchanged tense looks. Their rifles were nearly empty. Ammunition was scarce, food scarcer. But they had something else. Something the aliens didn't. A trap. The first alien dropped into the street, its glowing eyes scanning the ruins. Its breathing was ragged but purposeful, like a predator savoring the scent of prey. Its hide was mottled, with burns and bullet wounds yet already healing, knitting itself whole. More followed, 6 of them in total. They moved with unsettling precision, claws flexing, heads snapping from side to side, sniffing the air. Mason's squad waited in the shadows of the subway tunnel. The air reeked of sweat, blood, and dust. Every heartbeat sounded too loud. Then, the signal came. A chunk of rubble tossed by one of the fighters clattered onto the pavement. The aliens turned, eyes narrowing. Their claws scraped against asphalt. They stepped directly onto the kill zone. Mason slammed his fist into the detonator. The street collapsed. The aliens shrieked as concrete gave way beneath them, the pavement plunging into the hollowed-out subway line below. Rebar spears, welded together by desperate engineers, jutted upward like a forest of steel thorns. The creatures fell screaming into the trap, impaled through torsos, skulls, and throats. Their glowing blood splattered the tunnel walls. For once, they didn't heal fast enough. "Now!" Mason roared. The fighters opened fire, their rifles spitting thunder into the pit. Bullets chewed through alien skulls, tearing flesh and shattering bone. Grenades followed, the explosions echoing like thunder underground. When the smoke cleared, only silence remained. 6 alien corpses lay broken in the rebar cage. Dead. Truly dead. Mason climbed up onto the ruined street, his chest heaving, sweat and soot streaking his face. For the first time since the invasion began, he looked down at alien bodies that would not rise again. His squad dragged the corpses into the open. The aliens were grotesque even in death, flesh still twitching, claws curled like broken blades. But they were lifeless. One fighter pulled out a cracked phone and filmed. The camera shook, but it captured everything. The mangled bodies, the steel rebar soaked in alien blood, the proof that humanity could kill them. The footage spread in minutes. Across the globe, screens lit up. Grainy video of human resistance, fighters standing over alien corpses spread through bunkers, shelters, and ruined streets. People who had cowered in fear for days now leaned closer, their eyes widening. The aliens were not gods. They were not untouchable. They could die. Cheers erupted in bombed-out shelters. Soldiers shouted war cries in trenches. Even children huddled in underground tunnels raised their fists and whispered the words, "We can fight." Hope had been reborn in the ruins. But high above, the dreadnought pulsed with anger. Its flesh rippled as if convulsing. The overmind felt the shift in its prey. The fear it had counted on was slipping, replaced with something far more dangerous. Defiance. The voice roared again across the skies, vibrating through every building, every bone, every heart. Surrender. This time the word rang hollow. Mason spat into the dirt, glaring up at the dark silhouette blotting out the sun. His voice was hoarse, but the camera caught it. His words transmitted across the broken world. "Come and take it." The squad lifted. their rifles standing tall among the rubble. For the first time, the invaders had not left the battlefield victorious. For the first time, humanity had won. The dead didn't stay the same. 3 days after Mason Rivera's squad uploaded footage of the first alien corpses, new battles told a darker story. The bodies humanity dragged into the open, proof of their victory, began to change. Soldiers, stationed near the carcasses, swore they twitched at night. Others swore the smell wasn't just rot. It was evolution. And then the next wave arrived. In Berlin, tanks lined Unter den Linden, their barrels pointed down a boulevard of rubble. Soldiers, crouched behind barricades of sandbags and overturned buses, they were ready. They had studied the Chicago footage. They knew where to aim, how to trap, how to break alien flesh with steel. The first roar split the air, but when the creatures charged into the street, they weren't the same. Their skin was darker, harder. Bullets sparked off their hides like rain on steel. Grenades blasted chunks of meat away, only for new layers of armored flesh to push through seconds later. One soldier screamed as his machine gun jammed. Another cursed as he emptied his rifle into a beast's chest, only to see the wounds close instantly. The tanks opened fire. Shells boomed. The boulevard vanished in smoke and flame. When the dust cleared, the creatures stood tall, scorched but alive, their hides blackened like volcanic rock. They roared in triumph, leaping onto the tanks. Claws screeched against steel, ripping open hatches, dragging screaming men into the air. The resistance line shattered. Soldiers fled. The tanks, once humanity's pride, burned in the streets. It was the first reminder that these invaders were not static enemies. They adapted. They evolved. They learned. And humanity would need to do the same. In an underground garage beneath Tokyo, engineers worked by candlelight, sparks from their welding torches briefly illuminating their haggard faces. Every scrap of metal they could find was being reshaped into weapons. Car doors became shields. Subway rails became spears. Old construction cranes were converted into makeshift catapults. Colonel Sato walked the rows of improvisation, her jaw tight. They grow harder every battle. Standard bullets are useless now. We need new ways to break them. Think like wolves, not soldiers. Her words became orders. In the following days, humanity fought with traps, with cunning, with anything at hand. In Tokyo, skyscrapers were rigged with explosives collapsing onto alien packs. In Sao Paulo, whole bridges were lured into ambushes, detonated under their feet. In Nairobi, engineers repurposed mining equipment into massive railguns, firing 6-foot steel rods at supersonic speeds. The first alien hit by one was pinned against a wall like an insect on a collector's board, thrashing until it stilled. Everywhere, humans adapted. Everywhere, flesh bled. But adaptation had its cost. In Moscow, a young private named Victor watched. His best friend die as an alien shrugged off gunfire that would have killed its predecessors. He saw his commander torn apart before the man could even shout an order. And when the beast turned its glowing eyes toward him, Victor did the only thing left. He led it into a fuel depot wired with charges. The explosion tore half the district apart, killing hundreds. But the alien died with them. That footage spread too. Some called Victor a hero. Others cursed his sacrifice. But every human who saw it understood the message. Survival was no longer about standing your ground. It was about outthinking, outbuilding, and outlasting an enemy that refused to stay the same. High above, the dreadnought pulsed with approval. The overmind had tested its prey and found them stubborn. But stubbornness alone meant nothing. Let them fight. Let them adapt. It would adapt faster. The voice thundered once more, this time almost amused. Surrender. But in the bunkers and trenches, humanity didn't bow. They worked faster. They welded harder. They whispered plans in the dark. And every time an alien corpse fell, they studied it, broke it apart, and searched for weakness. They were no longer prey. They were predators, learning to kill monsters. The ground split open before the tanks could fire. Soldiers stumbled as a tremor rippled across the battlefield, buckling asphalt and toppling buildings already scarred by war. Dust erupted in choking clouds. From the fissure came a sound that froze every human heart, a guttural, vibrating growl deeper than thunder, older than fear itself. Then the monster rose. It was no soldier. No patrol beast. This was something else. 30 meters tall, it heaved itself from the earth, its body a grotesque fusion of living cannon and siege engine. Its spine jutted in jagged ridges, glowing veins pulsing like molten rivers beneath its flesh. Its arms ended in taloned fists large enough to crush tanks like toys. Along its back, vents hissed with steaming gas as its lungs expanded with alien rage. The siege beast roared, and the city of Warsaw trembled. Tanks opened fire immediately. Shells screamed into the monster's hide. Explosions rippled across its body, tearing chunks of flesh away, only for the wounds to close again, sealing over with fresh armored plates. The beast laughed. Not a sound of joy, but a low, guttural vibration that rattled every window in the city. Then it struck. One swing of its claw smashed a tank into scrap. The crew crushed before they could scream. Another blow hurled rubble across the battlefield, flattening whole squads. The monster's chest opened like a gaping wound, and from within, it fired a bolt of searing plasma that reduced 3 tanks to molten slag in an instant. The human line broke. In an underground hangar beneath Warsaw, alarms blared. Engineers scrambled, shouting over the roar of collapsing concrete above. The order had come down. Deploy the prototypes. 6 figures stood in the shadows, encased in suits of steel. Not tanks, not aircraft, but something new. Exosuits. 10 feet, tall, plated in thick armor, powered by roaring engines and hydraulic pistons. In their hands were massive weapons, steel blades, rotary cannons, and rocket pods welded together from the wreckage of war. Inside one of the suits, Lieutenant Kara, Vance tightened her grip on the controls. Her voice crackled over the comms, steady despite the tremors in her chest. Steel against flesh. Time to see which breaks first. The hangar doors blew open, the exosuits thundered onto the street. The siege beast turned, its glowing eyes locking onto the new arrivals. It roared, charging forward, claws tearing trenches in the asphalt. The exosuits met it head-on. Kara fired her rockets, explosions blooming across the monster's chest. 2 others opened with rotary cannons, streams of steel slugs hammering into its armored hide. A 4th charged with its blade raised high, slashing deep into the beast's thigh. Alien blood sprayed across the street, sizzling where it touched. Concrete. The monster howled, staggering, but it did not fall. With a backhanded swing, it swatted one exosuit into a building. The machine crashed through 3 floors before exploding in fire. "Stay on it," Kara roared. The team swarmed the creature, steel fists and blades clashing against bone and muscle. Sparks flew, flesh tore. The ground shook with every impact. The siege beast fought back with primal fury, its claws rending steel apart, its plasma blasts scorching entire streets. One by one, the exosuits faltered, their pilots screaming over the comms, until Kara made her move. She sprinted up the beast's arm, her exosuit's magnets locking onto its flesh like climbing spikes. The monster roared, shaking violently, trying to dislodge her, but she climbed higher, blade in hand, until she reached its throat. With a final scream, Kara drove the steel blade deep into the glowing core pulsing beneath its flesh. The beast froze. Its eyes widened. For a moment, the battlefield went silent. Then the creature screamed, a wail so deafening it rattled the bones of every soldier within miles. Its body convulsed, blood spraying in torrents. The exosuit blade cut deeper, twisting, tearing into the core. The beast collapsed, shaking the city with its death throes. When the dust settled, the siege engine lay broken. For the first time, an alien titan had fallen. On the ground, soldiers, who had once fled, now raised their rifles in triumph. The roar of human voices rose louder than the monster's death cry. High above, the dreadnought pulsed with rage. But below, humanity had found something new. Not just steel, not just courage. Steel and courage together. The body on the table twitched. It had been dead for hours, shot, burned, and pinned beneath steel beams. Yet when the surgeon's scalpel touched its chest, the flesh spasmed like it was still alive. The medics recoiled, muttering curses under their breath. But Colonel Heron leaned closer. He didn't flinch. "Cut deeper," he ordered. The scalpel slid between ribs that felt more like stone than bone. The chest opened with a sickening tear. Inside was not muscle, not fully. It was circuitry fused with tissue, glowing veins intertwined, with wires, a grotesque marriage of biology and machine. And buried at the center pulsed something worse. A node of living tissue, twitching with faint sparks. The alien was not just a soldier. It was a piece of something bigger, a fragment of the dreadnought itself. In bunkers around the world, scientists and commanders studied the discovery. The evidence was undeniable. The dreadnought was alive. Every soldier was grown from its own flesh, linked to its will. To kill the army, humanity had to kill the body. To end the invasion, they had to strike the brain. The plan was madness. A strike. Team would board the living ship. They would cut into its veins, crawl through its arteries, and plant explosives at its core. No one expected them to return, but volunteers lined up anyway. The night of the mission, the strike team assembled on a runway outside London. The city was a skeleton behind them, its skyline shattered, its streets glowing with the dim fire of smoldering ruins. 12 soldiers climbed into exosuits. Their armor bore scratches and bloodstains from battles already fought. Their weapons were patched together from scavenged parts, brutal and ugly but effective. Each pilot carried a pack of explosives, enough to vaporize a mountain if detonated at the right spot. Lieutenant Kara Vance, scarred from her battle with the siege beast, walked to the front of the squad. Her voice cut through the night air. "They told us the dreadnought is alive, that it bleeds, that it breathes. That means it has a heart. We're going to carve it out." The soldiers saluted. Engines roared. The boarding craft rose into the sky. From orbit, the dreadnought loomed like a cancer in the stars. It pulsed with alien light, its surface shifting and writhing as though restless. The boarding craft tore through its atmosphere. As it neared, the ship's skin rippled like disturbed water. Flesh split open into writhing orifices, glowing tendrils reaching to swat the human craft from the sky. "Brace!" Kara shouted. The craft dove, engines screaming. A narrow gap opened between plates of armored flesh. With one final burst of thrust, the craft plunged straight into the wound. Metal shrieked. Bulkheads twisted. The craft slammed into something, wet and soft, tearing through layers of living tissue before coming to a stop. Silence. Then a sound, like a heartbeat. A steady, thunderous rhythm reverberated through the walls. The soldiers unstrapped, weapons ready. "Welcome to hell," Kara muttered. The interior was worse than any nightmare. The corridors weren't corridors. They were arteries, pulsing with fluids that dripped from the walls. The floor flexed beneath their boots like muscle. Every step squelched. The air reeked of blood and acid. The first alien patrol emerged from the walls themselves, peeling out of the flesh like larvae tearing free of cocoons. The soldiers opened fire, exosuits unleashing steel storms into the cramped space. Blood sprayed, coating the walls, but the dreadnought reacted. Its arteries tightened, squeezing. Veins bulged, spraying acidic bile into the passage. The team staggered as their boots sank into living tissue, trying to swallow them whole. "Cut it open," Kara roared. Plasma torches flared. Steel blades ripped. The soldiers carved their way through the walls, tearing muscle apart to keep moving. Forward. Every step was war. Finally, they reached it, a chamber larger than a cathedral. At its center hung the Overmind's core, a pulsing brain of flesh and machinery suspended in veins and tendrils, glowing with malignant intelligence. Its voice filled the chamber without sound, vibrating in their bones. "Surrender." But Kara only raised her blade. Not a chance. The soldiers surged forward, steel against living nightmares. Blades slashed tendrils. Explosives were strapped to pulsating walls. The Overmind screamed, not with sound but with a psychic shriek that threatened to split their skulls. Kara ignored it. She planted her explosives against the core itself. The chamber trembled. The dreadnought convulsed. And for the first time, the Overmind knew fear. The dreadnought screamed. Not through sound, but through the world itself. Buildings cracked in Warsaw, windows shattered in London, oceans trembled, waves surging as though the earth itself recoiled. The soldiers inside felt it most. The walls of the living ship convulsed, veins constricting like a throat trying to gag them out. Blood geysered from ruptured arteries, splattering across their armor. The Overmind's psychic roar pressed against their skulls like invisible knives. Half, the team staggered. One soldier tore off his helmet, shrieking, blood pouring from his nose and ears before he collapsed. The Overmind's voice slithered into their thoughts. You are filth. You are tools. You are meat. Lieutenant Kara Vance gritted her teeth, pain clawing at her brain. Her HUD blurred with static. The Overmind's presence was everywhere, behind her eyes, under her skin, gnawing at her will. But she pushed forward. Plant the charges. She shouted, her voice hoarse but unbroken. The soldiers fanned out into the cathedral-like chamber. The Overmind's brain core pulsed like a diseased sun, tendrils lashing out like whips of living steel. One struck a soldier full force, impaling his exosuit and hoisting him into the air. His scream echoed as the tendril drained his life, his body shriveling inside the armor. Cut them down, Kara roared. Blades of human steel slashed. Sparks flew where metal met flesh. Explosives were strapped to the core's supporting veins. Every step forward was drowned in alien ichor and human blood. But the Overmind adapted. The chamber shifted, walls splitting open into fanged maws. Dozens of new creatures poured out, crawling on all fours, their spines protruding like serrated blades. They swarmed, shrieking, their claws raking against armor. The exosuits opened fire, miniguns roaring in a confined storm of steel. Aliens dropped by the dozen, shredded, but more kept coming, spilling from the walls like an endless tide. Kara fought at the front, her blade carving arcs through the monsters. Her visor cracked, ichor splattering across her face. She felt her strength draining, not from wounds, but from the Overmind's psychic grip. Each swing grew heavier, each thought felt stolen. Submit, the voice hissed. You cannot kill a god. Her knees buckled. The blade slipped from her hands. Images assaulted her mind, visions of Earth burning, cities rotting into alien hives, humanity enslaved to an endless cycle of flesh. The Overmind was trying to drown her in inevitability. And then she remembered the siege beast. She remembered climbing its arm, steel blade in hand, while the world told her it was impossible. She remembered the moment she drove steel into its throat and heard it die. Gods could bleed. Gods could die. Her grip tightened. She rose. No, she hissed through clenched teeth. But I can kill a parasite. With a defiant scream, Kara plunged forward. Her exosuit roared as she drove its hydraulic blade deep into the Overmind's pulsing cortex. Sparks and ichor erupted, blinding the chamber in a storm of light. The Overmind shrieked, not just in her ears, but in her bones, her blood, her very soul. Every soldier collapsed under the psychic blast. Walls ruptured, tendrils thrashed like titanic snakes crushing armor and bodies alike. But Kara didn't stop. She carved again and again, each slash tearing into the core. Detonate, she screamed over comms. Now! The survivors triggered their charges. Explosions rippled across the chamber, ripping apart veins, collapsing supports. The brain core convulsed, glowing with unstable energy. The dreadnought writhed in orbit, visible even from Earth's surface as a colossal wound tore open in its hull. Alien forces across the globe faltered, stumbling mid-battle as their Overmind's grip weakened. Kara stood in the heart of the dying god, her armor cracked, her body broken, her blade buried deep in its flesh. The Overmind's voice wailed, fading, into nothing. And then came silence. The surviving soldiers dragged Kara from the collapsing chamber. The dreadnought convulsed one last time before plummeting toward Earth, fire consuming its body as atmosphere tore it apart. They had done it. They had slain the god of flesh. The sky was burning. All across Earth, people looked up and saw it. A wound in the heavens, a star on fire. The dreadnought, once a symbol of alien dominance, now fell like a dying sun. Its colossal body tore through the upper atmosphere, leaving streaks of fire across the night. Cities trembled as the shockwaves began. Windows shattered, sirens wailed, children clung to parents in the streets. Across radios and broken holoscreens came the same desperate broadcast: impact expected, prepare for devastation. The Overmind was dead, but its corpse was about to crush the world it failed to conquer. Inside the collapsing dreadnought, Lieutenant Kara Vance stumbled through buckling corridors of flesh and steel. Sparks rained from shredded veins of circuitry. Fluids poured like rivers from ruptured arteries. The floor tilted beneath her as gravity shifted violently. Her exosuit was barely functional, hydraulics hissing, alarms screaming. Each step was agony. But behind her limped 3 surviving soldiers dragging packs of unused explosives. Their faces were gaunt, their armor scorched. They all knew what it meant. If the dreadnought hit Earth intact, millions would die. Perhaps billions. The only chance was to detonate its core before impact, but that meant they had to stay aboard. Outside, the world prepared for doom. In New York, priests led prayers in broken cathedrals as flames streaked across the horizon. In Tokyo, children hid beneath blankets as their parents whispered lies of comfort. In Laga, soldiers raised their rifles to the sky, defiant even in futility. All eyes watched the falling Titan. Inside the ship, the soldiers reached the failing core chamber. What remained of the Overmind's brain still pulsed faintly, twitching, in death throes. Energy flared across its ruined tendrils. It was like standing inside the ribcage of a god's corpse. Kara turned to her team. "You know what this means," she said. Her voice cracked, but her eyes were steady. The soldiers exchanged glances. None flinched. "We'll hold the line," one muttered. "You finish it." They began strapping the last of their explosives to the chamber walls, hands shaking, faces calm. Warriors who already knew their graves. Kara keyed her comms, though she knew no one might hear. "This is Lieutenant Kara Vance of Earth Command. We are inside the dreadnought. We are armed with enough charges to rip its corpse apart before it hits. If we fail, remember us." Static answered her. It was enough. The chamber convulsed as the dreadnought tore through the stratosphere. Heat seared the walls, fire licking into the wounds of the ship. The air grew thin, vibrating with the roar of re-entry. Kara stood at the core. Her armor's systems were failing, HUD flickering, oxygen warning flashing red. She raised her blade one last time and drove it deep into the pulsating remains of the Overmind's heart. The core shuddered. The explosives armed. Time slowed. Her soldiers saluted her. One by one, they nodded, eyes fierce. "Light it," one whispered. She did. From Earth, the falling star erupted. The dreadnought split apart mid-descent, fire blooming across its corpse in titanic blossoms of light. Chunks of alien flesh and steel scattered, burning in the atmosphere, raining harmlessly into oceans and deserts instead of cities. For a heartbeat, night turned into day, and then the light faded. The dreadnought was gone. Silence followed. In the streets, people blinked at the sky in disbelief. Priests fell to their knees, tears streaming. Children pointed at the streaks of fire, laughing with wonder. Soldiers lowered their rifles and wept. Humanity had survived. But when the survivors of the strike team were counted, no word came from Kara Vance or her squad. They were gone, swallowed in fire. Yet their story spread like wildfire. Across every continent, every ruined city, voices whispered their names. In camps of refugees, in military barracks, in the ashes of homes, one truth spread with unstoppable force. It wasn't alien gods that saved humanity. It was human steel. Weeks later, atop the shattered ruins of London, a new flag was raised. Not of a single nation, but of Earth itself. Burned into its fabric were the words that defined the war. When human steel met alien flesh, flesh bled. Final moral punchline: The universe may birth monsters vast enough to blot out the stars, but humanity carries something greater than flesh or fire. We carry will, and will is steel.